crest feathers on the tops of their heads. And we also have our African penguins. Our African penguins have two different ways of looking depending on whether they're an adult or a juvenile. So our juveniles look grey or silver in colour, and they don't have the nice stripe markings down the sides of their heads or the horseshoe straps across their chest, whereas our adults have got the nice white stripes that the juveniles don't. The juveniles will get these at around 18 to 24 months old when they go into their molt, and they will get their adult plumage. Now, African penguins do come from the south coast of Africa, and they'll be found all the way across from Boulders Beach all the way up to Port Elizabeth in the world. And on their beaches, they will dig these burrow holes themselves using their beaks and feet. Obviously here for safety reasons, we actually reinforce them with terracotta tubing to make sure our keepers have safe access to the beach at all times. But they would dig them into the sand and the guano build-up, which is actually penguin poo in the wild, to secure them together. Now they use these burrows for several different reasons. Quite an important one is shelter from the sun. It gives them the opportunity to get out of the hot sun. As you can imagine, it can be quite warm in Africa during the day, and this provides shade for them. And they also use it to make their nests in. So if you see any of our Africans carrying sticks or bits of grass or foliage from anywhere and taking them back into their burrows, that's what they're doing, they're building a nest. With our African penguins, they can actually nest all year round. They stay on the land for most of the year, only really going into the water to hunt their food. So they can actually breed more than once throughout the year. They can potentially breed 3 times, having 2 chicks at a time. So they can possibly have up to 6 chicks. Now our macaronis breed in a very different way, and they come from a very different environment in the world. So they'll be found on sub-Antarctic islands such as the Falklands and South Georgia, and they'll typically be on a rocky beach just like the one to the left of me here. So they'll make their nest on pebbles. They're what we call surface breeders. And they make their nest with these pebbles, picking them up in their beaks and arranging them into a shape they're happy with. And once they've done that, they'll start laying their eggs. Now I do say eggs, but they will only have the 1 chick. The first egg they lay is normally a little bit on the small side, and it's not usually fertile. And that's the one they'll sit on for around 4 or 5 days, and then they'll discard it from their nest. We're not entirely sure why they do this, if it's a defence for predators so that they can take the extra egg, or if it is to check the commitment between the couple, but they will always lay this first egg. And then within a couple of days of discarding that one, they'll lay a second egg. This one's hopefully quite a bit larger and fertile, and they'll sit on that one for around 35 days to incubate it, resulting in a lovely macaroni chick. Now we did have one born last year, and she's actually just on the crossing there at the moment. She's very easy to spot at the moment because she's got very, very short crest feathers, and she'll actually be 1 in May. And when she goes through her molt in around September, end of August time, she'll actually get a longer and slightly thicker across the top of her head, her crest will get. Now when our penguins breed, our macaroni penguins, they will only have just the 1 chick, and they will only stay on the land for around 6 months at a time. So they'll come onto the land to breed. After they've finished rearing their chicks, they'll go through a process called molting, and then they'll actually go back into the water once they've got their nice new set of feathers for around 6 months of the year. Now I mentioned molting. Kez, would you like to tell us a little bit about the process of molting, please?
Yeah, sure. Our penguins actually all go through a molt once a year, an annual molt. Our macaronis generally do it at the end of their breeding season, so come around about August, September time. However, our Africans will kind of all molt at different times throughout the year. Basically what they do is they lose all of their feathers, and underneath they have a nice fresh new set. However, during the molt, they're not actually waterproof, so they generally don't swim. So they'll actually fatten up. They can put on about an extra 50% onto their body weight. Because the molt will last about 2 to 3 weeks. And they actually do it because salt water is quite corrosive, so it does damage their feathers over time. If you can imagine wearing the same clothes for a year, they start to fall apart after a little while. So if you do see any kind of scruffy looking ones, there's a couple down here. No doubt they're due to get ready to go through their molt. Once they have finished, they do look lovely and nice and pristine. So again, you might spot a couple out on the beach. They're looking really nice and lovely at the moment.
Thanks very much, Kez. So as Kez mentioned there, obviously they all go through this process annually. There is actually one of our Africans at the top of the beach at the moment. If you do spot him, he's got a very kind of fluffy grey looking back at the moment, and that's because he's halfway through his molt, so he's looking quite kind of fluffy and scruffy at the moment. But after this process he will look excuse me, he will look lovely and pristine afterwards. And as you mentioned, obviously it's something that is very important to them so that they can go in and hunt in the water. Now we feed our penguins 4 times a day. They do get sprats 4 times a day, 365 days of the year, and there's a very good reason for this. Firstly, they are a nice sustainable fish. They repopulate very quickly in the water, so they're a very fast regrowing fish, breeding constantly and repopulating themselves. They're also a very nice cheap fish. They're not eaten very commonly in the UK, but they are plentiful in our water, so it's something that's really easy and effective for us to catch. And lastly, it's also a really good alternative to what they would eat in the wild. They typically eat small shoaling fish like sardines and also anchovies. They will also eat some krill and some small squid and octopus as well if they come across it, but this provides them with all of the nutrients and minerals and things they need in their diet to stay nice and healthy. So they do enjoy it and they never get bored of sprats. They do come down for it every day just as excited as the day before. Now don't worry if you see some of our penguins that aren't eating at this particular feed. They probably will have come down to one of the earlier feeds, or they will come down to one of the later ones. That's why we give them the opportunity to feed 4 times a day, because penguins will only eat when they're hungry. They don't overeat, and they won't eat just for the sake of it. They will only eat when they're hungry, which is why we give them plenty of opportunity to do so. And we also do it in 3 different ways. So they have the hand feed down here on the decking. They also have the feed in the middle in the trough there, and we also do a bit of a scatter feed into the water just to encourage their natural behaviours. Now I'm going to point out as well some of our characters that we have down here and different ways of telling them apart. So this one just stood in front of me here is called Solly. Solly was hand reared at Twycross, so he's very confident around people and likes to spend quite a lot of his time with our penguin patrollers and our keepers. And he also is very easy to tell apart because he's the only macaroni with a green tag, and he also has a bit of a crossover at the end of his beak. So his beak is just slightly crossed over at the end, which is just a natural condition that he has. Some of our penguins will develop a slightly crossed over beak. We also have Eric just next to Kez. Eric is nearly 3, he'll actually be 3 in May, and Eric is quite a big handsome boy. He tends to come out to quite a lot of the feeds, and he also likes to play around a bit. Sometimes he'll come down to the feeds just to have a bit of a peck at our keepers and kind of let them know that he's there. We also have Mr. Slick and Mrs. Slick. Now they're actually named because their crest feathers look like they've got a bit of a centre parting in them, almost like they've got gel in their feathers. Mrs. Slick is actually just on the crossing in front of Lois there with the red and yellow on her tag, and her partner Mr. Slick is just slightly further up the beach with the blue and yellow on his tag. And Mr. Slick's crest in particular looks very much like he's got a bit of a side parting with gel in his feathers. Now with our Africans, we can actually use their spot patterns to tell them apart. They're as individual and unique to our penguins as our fingerprints are to us. So you will never see 2 African penguins with the exact same markings. So I can point out we've got Minnie. Minnie is the quite small bold penguin just running in towards the bucket now. And she's not only our smallest African, but she's also only got 2 spots on her belly, so she's quite easy to tell apart from the others. We also have some others that have quite unique shapes on them. We've got Phoebe, and she's got 3 spots just under a horseshoe strap on her chest there. And we've also got a juvenile called Diamond, who's got a diamond shaped pattern in her spots on her belly. So they are quite easy to tell apart. And right on cue, I will also tell you about one of our most famous penguins. We've got Pat just on the edge of the crossing coming down now. Pat is actually our oldest penguin. She's 35, so she's reached a ripe old age. We think the key to her success is the fact that she actually outlived her first partner and found herself a bit of a younger model. So her new partner is only 11, and we think he's what keeps her young at heart. But she's doing really, really well. She's still very healthy and kind of doing all the right things. So she does like to come down to the feeds, and when she does, she always stands with her flippers out the way she is right now. She's quite an elegant old lady. So Pat is, as I said, quite a special penguin. She's one of the oldest penguins in the world known in captivity, and we are hopeful that she'll go on for a good many more years yet, making her possibly the oldest penguin ever.
Why?
Now we'll just finish up by telling you a little bit about our conservation here. So obviously our Africans are an endangered species. This means that in the world their numbers are in decline and have been for quite a few years now. It is really, really important that we do as much as we can to protect them in their wild environment, as well as kind of here at home making changes. Now there's something really simple all of you can do to help marine animals in the wild. So you can actually all make sure that when you're using the beaches, whether it's right here in England or whether it's abroad, make sure you take your rubbish home with you. Something as simple as a carrier bag can actually be fatal to an animal if it is ingested. It's really, really simple thing to do, just to make sure you take your rubbish home with you, and we all keep our seas clean. Another small thing you can do as well is making sure that when you're choosing fish at the supermarket, we all like to eat our fish fingers and our fish at the supermarket. Just make sure you're eating sustainably caught fish and also the better alternatives. Most of the alternatives that are available in the supermarket are not only cheaper, so they're better for your pocket, they taste really good, they taste almost exactly the same as the bigger alternatives, and also they're sustainably caught. They're much more plentiful in the oceans and they haven't been overfished. So it's a really good opportunity for you to do two small things that can have a really big impact on marine animals in the wild. Now I will leave my talk there, but if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to ask either myself, one of our keepers here, or Sean, our penguin patroller. We'll be happy to try and answer any questions. If I could just ask you all to remain patient while the feed finishes. It may go on for another couple of minutes or so, but we'll let you know when our penguins are finished and it is safe to come across. Your next talks and feeds